A curious thing happened long before you pressed play on this message. Someone thought a chapter had ended. Someone convinced themselves that distance had answered every question. Someone believed the story had already chosen its ending. Yet today, something feels unfinished, and that feeling is impossible to ignore. For a moment, imagine a book that was closed too quickly. The final page was never read. The most important sentence was never understood. And years later, the person who closed it begins wondering what was hidden inside those remaining pages. That is where this message begins. Not with a goodbye. Not with regret. Not even with a reunion. It begins with a realization. A realization so quiet that almost nobody notices it at first. Don't skip. Because what you are about to understand is far more meaningful than a simple story about the past. There are moments when people think they are moving forward, but in reality they are carrying unanswered questions behind them. They build routines. They fill their schedules. They tell themselves everything is settled. Yet certain thoughts keep returning. Not every day. Not every week. But often enough to leave a mark. And strangely, your presence has become one of those thoughts. Not because of something dramatic. Not because of something anyone forced. But because authenticity leaves traces that time cannot easily erase. The fascinating part is that many people never realize the value of a connection while they are standing inside it. Only later, after countless ordinary days pass, do they begin noticing what made that connection different. The comfort. The honesty. The feeling of being understood without needing to explain every detail. The way certain conversations felt lighter. The way certain silences felt safe. The way certain moments lingered long after they ended. Stay till the end. Something important is waiting for you. Because this is where the story starts shifting. Someone has recently been looking backward, not to relive old memories, but to understand them. And understanding changes everything. A memory once dismissed suddenly feels significant. A conversation once forgotten suddenly feels meaningful. A detail once overlooked suddenly appears impossible to ignore. Have you ever noticed how clarity rarely arrives all at once? It arrives in fragments. One realization today. Another realization tomorrow. A deeper understanding next week. Until eventually an entirely different picture appears. That picture is beginning to form now. And what makes it remarkable is that the image being revealed has less to do with who you were then and more to do with who you have become now. Because while others were focused on appearances, circumstances, or temporary situations, something much deeper was taking place within you. Growth. Quiet growth. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that happens while nobody is watching. The kind that transforms a person without demanding recognition. That transformation matters more than you know. Because somewhere beyond your awareness, someone has started comparing assumptions with reality. And the comparison is creating questions. Unexpected questions. Questions that cannot be answered quickly. Questions that keep returning during ordinary moments. What if they misunderstood you? What if they only saw one chapter of your story? What if they walked away before discovering the most important parts? What if the person they remember is only a small fraction of the person you are today? These questions are opening doors. Not physical doors. Inner doors. Doors that lead to reflection. Doors that lead to honesty. Doors that lead to truths people spend years avoiding. And the closer someone moves toward truth, the harder it becomes to pretend certain feelings never existed. But wait. The most surprising part has not happened yet. Because this story is not really about looking backward. It is about what becomes visible when the past finally stops hiding the truth. And in the next part, a detail will emerge that changes the entire meaning of everything that came before. A detail so simple that most people would overlook it. Yet once it is seen, nothing looks quite the same again. Without warning, an ordinary moment can reveal something extraordinary. Not through a dramatic announcement. Not through a sudden message. But through a realization that arrives quietly and refuses to leave. That is exactly where the story continues. Because the detail I mentioned before has finally begun to surface, and it is far different from what most people would expect. The surprising truth is that the strongest impressions people leave behind are rarely created by grand gestures. They are created by consistency. By sincerity. By the small moments that seemed insignificant at the time. And recently, someone has been discovering just how many of those moments were connected to you. At first, it appeared harmless. Just a passing memory. A familiar thought drifting through an ordinary day. Something easily dismissed. But then another memory appeared. Then another. Then another. And suddenly what seemed random no longer felt random at all. Have you ever experienced that strange feeling when pieces of a puzzle begin fitting together long after you stop trying to solve it? That feeling is difficult to explain. Yet once it starts, it becomes impossible to ignore. Don't skip. Because what is unfolding now is deeper than nostalgia. It is awareness. A growing awareness that certain people influence our lives in ways we do not fully understand until much later. Someone has begun noticing that many of their happiest memories share one unexpected detail. You. Not because you were trying to become unforgettable. Not because you were seeking attention. But because authenticity leaves a stronger impression than performance ever could. And here is where the story becomes even more interesting. The image they carried of you for so long is beginning to change. For years, they thought they understood who you were. They believed they had reached a conclusion. They believed they had already figured everything out. Yet the more they reflect, the more uncertain those old conclusions become. Because growth changes perspective. And perspective changes everything. What once seemed ordinary now appears rare. What once seemed familiar now appears remarkable. What once seemed simple now reveals unexpected depth. Stay till the end. Something important is waiting for you. Because another realization has quietly entered the picture. Someone has started recognizing that your value was never tied to circumstances. It was never dependent on timing. It was never dependent on approval. The qualities that made you special existed long before anyone acknowledged them. And now those qualities are becoming impossible to overlook. Patience. Resilience. Warmth. Understanding. The ability to keep moving forward even when nobody applauded your progress. Those things matter. Far more than most people realize. And the more someone reflects on them, the more one question continues appearing. Why did it take so long to see this clearly? That question has become a companion. It appears unexpectedly. During quiet moments. During routine days. During times when everything else should feel settled. Yet instead of disappearing, it grows stronger. Because truth has a peculiar habit. Once it begins revealing itself, it rarely stops halfway. And there is another layer to this story that has not fully emerged yet. A layer connected to something nobody anticipated. Not a memory. Not a coincidence. Not even a conversation. Something much more subtle. Someone has begun noticing patterns. Patterns that point toward a realization they never expected to reach. The realization that the person they thought they left behind may no longer exist in the form they remember. Because people evolve. People grow. People become more than the versions others once knew. And that discovery is creating a mixture of curiosity and admiration that becomes stronger with every passing day. Yet what truly changes everything is still hidden just beyond view. A single insight. A single understanding. A single moment of clarity that is approaching faster than anyone realizes. And when that moment finally arrives, it will explain why this connection has continued appearing in unexpected ways, even after so much time has passed. The remarkable part? That moment is closer than it seems. And in the next part, the first glimpse of that hidden understanding finally begins to reveal itself. There is a moment that arrives in every meaningful story when the heart stops asking what happened and begins asking why it happened. That moment is here. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like a distant light becoming visible through the morning mist. Because the realization growing inside this story is no longer about memories alone. It is about meaning. And meaning changes everything. For a long time, someone believed the connection was simply a chapter from another season of life. A pleasant memory. A completed experience. Something valuable, perhaps, but finished. Yet recently, that explanation has stopped feeling complete. The reason is simple. The more they reflect, the more they notice something unusual. The people who leave temporary impressions eventually fade into the background. The details become blurry. The emotions become weaker. The memories lose their color. But certain people remain clear. Year after year. Season after season. Not because anyone tries to remember them. Because forgetting them becomes impossible. And that realization has created a question that keeps returning. What made this connection different? Why does it still feel alive inside moments that should have moved on long ago? Why does your name still carry a feeling that other names do not? Don't skip. Because this is where the deeper truth begins to emerge. The answer has nothing to do with perfection. In fact, perfection rarely creates lasting connections. What creates lasting connections is authenticity. Being real. Being present. Being yourself even when there was no reward for doing so. And slowly, someone has started recognizing that the qualities they searched for elsewhere were often the same qualities they experienced around you. That discovery was unexpected. Because people sometimes spend years searching for something they already encountered. Not realizing its value until distance provides perspective. Imagine looking at a mountain while standing inches away from it. You cannot see its full shape. You cannot appreciate its size. You only see fragments. But when you step back, the entire picture becomes visible. That is what perspective has been doing. It has been revealing a picture that was hidden in plain sight. Stay till the end. Something important is waiting for you. Because another layer has quietly appeared. Someone has begun comparing who you were then with who you are now. Not directly. Not through constant observation. But through the small clues life leaves behind. And what they are discovering surprises them. The person they remember carried kindness. The person you have become carries strength and kindness. The person they remember had dreams. The person you have become has grown through those dreams. The person they remember was still becoming. The person you are today has continued evolving. And that growth has become impossible to ignore. There is something powerful about witnessing someone's evolution, even from a distance. It creates respect. It creates admiration. It creates a sense that perhaps there was more to the story than anyone realized at the time. Yet the most fascinating realization is only beginning to take shape. Because this is no longer about what was lost. It is about what was misunderstood. There is a difference. A significant difference. Something lost feels gone. Something misunderstood feels unfinished. And unfinished stories have a unique way of returning to the surface. Not because they demand attention. Because they quietly seek understanding. That search for understanding has become stronger lately. Stronger than routine. Stronger than distraction. Stronger than the explanations that once seemed sufficient. And now another question has appeared. A question nobody expected. What if the most important thing about this connection was never fully recognized? What if its true value was hidden beneath assumptions? What if the lesson it carried has only now become visible? That question has opened a door. A door leading toward an insight that changes the emotional landscape completely. An insight connected not to who someone was. Not to who someone hoped to become. But to who they truly are. And as that insight moves closer, something remarkable is happening. The old story is beginning to lose its power. The assumptions are beginning to fade. The confusion is beginning to clear. In their place, a new understanding is forming. One built on honesty. One built on perspective. One built on seeing things as they really are. And in the next part, the first words of that understanding finally come into focus. When they do, the entire meaning of this connection will begin to look different than ever before. A single realization can sit quietly in the background for months, even years, before suddenly stepping into the light. And when it finally does, everything that once seemed confusing begins connecting in ways nobody expected. That is where this journey continues. Because the understanding that has been forming is no longer distant. It is no longer hidden behind uncertainty. It is beginning to speak. Not with words that can be heard. But with clarity that can be felt. For so long, someone viewed this connection through the lens of timing. They thought timing was the entire story. Wrong moment. Wrong circumstances. Wrong season. That explanation felt comfortable because it required no deeper examination. But recently, another possibility has appeared. A possibility far more difficult to ignore. What if timing was never the real issue? What if there was something deeper underneath it all? Don't skip. Because this question changes the direction of everything. When people look back honestly, they sometimes discover that what they called timing was actually understanding that had not yet matured. Sometimes people meet before they know themselves. Sometimes they encounter meaningful connections before they possess the perspective required to appreciate them. Sometimes life presents something valuable long before they recognize its value. And later, after growth has taken place, they see the same situation through completely different eyes. That is what has been happening. The picture is changing. Not because the past changed. Because understanding changed. And understanding has a remarkable power. It transforms old memories into new lessons. It transforms overlooked moments into meaningful ones. It transforms ordinary experiences into turning points. Stay till the end. Something important is waiting for you. Because another truth is beginning to surface. Someone has started realizing that your presence represented something rare. Not perfection. Not certainty. Something far more meaningful. Genuineness. The ability to be yourself without constantly trying to become someone else. The ability to care without demanding recognition. The ability to remain kind without seeking applause. These qualities often appear simple. Yet they are becoming increasingly difficult to find. And that realization carries weight. Because once someone recognizes the rarity of something, they begin viewing it differently. The things once taken for granted become precious. The things once overlooked become unforgettable. The things once assumed become appreciated. That appreciation has been growing quietly. Not all at once. Little by little. Moment by moment. Until it has become impossible to dismiss. Yet there is another layer still hidden beneath the surface. A layer connected to something surprisingly personal. Someone has begun asking themselves a question they never expected to ask. Not, what happened? Not, what could have been? But something much deeper. What did this connection reveal about me? That question changes everything. Because meaningful connections do more than show us another person. They reveal parts of ourselves. Our fears. Our hopes. Our blind spots. Our capacity to grow. And through that reflection, a new understanding has emerged. The connection was never only about companionship. It was also about transformation. About becoming more aware. More honest. More open. More willing to see what was previously hidden. That awareness is creating a shift that cannot be reversed. A shift away from assumptions. A shift toward truth. A shift toward recognizing the value of what once seemed ordinary. And now something unexpected is happening. The story is no longer centered on yesterday. It is beginning to lean toward tomorrow. The focus is changing. The perspective is expanding. The questions are evolving. Because once understanding arrives, the mind naturally begins wondering about possibilities. Possibilities that once seemed distant. Possibilities that once seemed unlikely. Possibilities that only become visible after clarity appears. And that is precisely where the next chapter begins. A possibility has entered the picture. Quietly. Unexpectedly. Almost unnoticed. Yet it carries enough significance to change the emotional direction of everything that follows. In the next part, that possibility finally takes shape, and the reason this connection continues drawing attention after all this time becomes clearer than ever before. Sometimes the most important shift does not happen when someone remembers you. It happens when they stop remembering who they thought you were and begin seeing who you truly are. That distinction may seem small, but it changes everything. Because memories are often incomplete. They capture moments. They capture emotions. They capture fragments. But they rarely capture the full story. And lately, a quiet realization has been unfolding. Someone has begun understanding that the version of you they carried in their mind was only a single chapter, not the entire book. For years, they believed they already knew how the story ended. They believed they understood the lesson. They believed there was nothing left to discover. Yet life has a curious way of challenging certainty. It introduces new perspectives. New experiences. New understanding. And suddenly the conclusions that once felt permanent begin to soften. Don't skip. Because what comes next reveals why this realization feels so powerful. The truth is, people often recognize growth most clearly when they compare expectations with reality. They expect someone to remain the same. They expect old patterns to continue. They expect familiar versions of people to stay frozen in time. Then one day they discover that life kept moving. Growth kept happening. Wisdom kept developing. Strength kept forming quietly beneath the surface. And that discovery creates something unexpected. Respect. A deeper kind of respect than admiration alone. The respect that comes from realizing someone continued evolving even when nobody was watching. The respect that comes from recognizing perseverance. The respect that comes from seeing how far someone has traveled internally. That respect has become impossible to ignore. And it has led to another realization. One that arrived without warning. The qualities that once seemed ordinary now appear extraordinary. The calmness. The patience. The way you carried yourself through uncertainty. The way you continued moving forward without demanding validation. Those things tell a story. A story that becomes more meaningful the longer someone reflects on it. Stay till the end. Something important is waiting for you. Because a new question has quietly entered the picture. A question that changes the emotional atmosphere completely. What if this connection was never meant to be understood through the eyes of the past? What if it can only be understood through the perspective of the present? Think about that for a moment. How many things in life look completely different once enough time has passed? How many lessons only make sense after experience adds context? How many answers remain hidden until the right season arrives? Perhaps that is why this realization feels so significant. Because it did not arrive early. It arrived exactly when understanding was ready to receive it. And now the possibility mentioned earlier is becoming clearer. Not a dramatic possibility. Not an unrealistic one. A meaningful one. The possibility that some connections leave a lasting impression because they were built on something genuine. Something real. Something that continues carrying value even after years have passed. That realization has created a feeling that is difficult to describe. A feeling somewhere between gratitude and wonder. A feeling that asks a simple but profound question. What else was overlooked? If this much was misunderstood, what other truths remain hidden beneath the surface? That question is opening another door. And behind that door waits a discovery that nobody anticipated. Because the more someone reflects, the more they begin noticing a pattern that has been present all along. A pattern connecting memories. A pattern connecting lessons. A pattern connecting moments that once appeared unrelated. And at the center of that pattern is something surprisingly simple. You were never remembered because of a single moment. You were remembered because of the feeling your presence created. A feeling that time could not easily replace. A feeling that continued resurfacing when least expected. A feeling that now carries more meaning than ever before. Yet even this is not the deepest part of the story. There is one final layer beginning to reveal itself. A layer connected to a realization so personal, so honest, that it changes the entire direction of what comes next. And in the next part, that hidden realization finally steps out of the shadows and into the light, revealing why this journey feels unfinished in the most unexpected way. An unexpected truth often arrives disguised as a simple observation. At first, it seems small. Easy to overlook. Easy to dismiss. But then it stays. It follows you into quiet moments. It appears during ordinary days. It returns when everything else has already faded. And eventually, you realize it was never small at all. That is exactly where this story stands now. Because the realization that has been slowly approaching is no longer hiding behind questions. It is beginning to reveal answers. Not every answer. Not yet. But enough to change the way everything is understood. For a long time, someone believed the connection existed only in memory. A collection of moments. A collection of feelings. A collection of experiences stored safely in the past. Yet something unexpected happened. The more they reflected, the less it felt like memory. And the more it felt like meaning. There is a difference. Memory looks backward. Meaning continues forward. Memory preserves what happened. Meaning explains why it mattered. And suddenly that distinction has become impossible to ignore. Don't skip. Because this may be the most important realization so far. Someone has begun understanding that what remained unforgettable was not a specific day. Not a specific conversation. Not a specific moment. It was the impact. The quiet influence. The way certain encounters continue shaping a person long after they end. That realization carries weight. Because influence cannot always be measured immediately. Sometimes its significance becomes visible only after years of growth. Only after enough life has been lived. Only after enough perspective has been gained. And now that perspective is creating something remarkable. A deeper appreciation for what was once misunderstood. A deeper appreciation for qualities that were once taken for granted. A deeper appreciation for a connection that carried more value than anyone recognized at the time. Stay till the end. Something important is waiting for you. Because another layer has emerged. And this layer changes the emotional center of the story. Someone has realized that every time they tried to explain why your presence remained significant, their explanations felt incomplete. There was always something missing. Some piece that words could not fully capture. Until recently. Because a new understanding has started forming. The significance was never based on what you provided. It was based on what you inspired. Think about that carefully. There is a profound difference. People may forget gifts. People may forget circumstances. People may even forget details. But they rarely forget how someone inspired them to see themselves differently. How someone inspired honesty, growth, reflection, hope, courage, the willingness to become more than they were before. And that is exactly what has been coming into focus. The realization that your presence represented possibility. Possibility for deeper understanding. Possibility for greater authenticity. Possibility for becoming more aligned with what truly matters. That realization has changed the entire picture. Because now the story is no longer asking what happened. It is asking what was learned. And the answers are becoming clearer every day. Lessons about appreciation. Lessons about timing. Lessons about recognizing value before it becomes distance. Lessons about seeing people for who they truly are rather than who we assume them to be. These lessons have created a sense of clarity that was absent before. Yet clarity often brings another gift. Curiosity. The kind of curiosity that opens new doors. The kind of curiosity that wonders whether the story has revealed everything it was meant to reveal. And that curiosity is leading towards something unexpected. Because there is still one question waiting quietly in the background. A question that has not fully surfaced until now. What if this connection was never important because of where it began? What if it became important because of what it continues teaching? That question changes everything. Because it transforms the connection from a memory into a lesson. From a chapter into a journey. From something that happened into something that still carries meaning. And as that understanding grows stronger, another realization is beginning to appear just beyond the horizon. A realization connected not to the past. Not to distance. Not to old assumptions. But to a truth that has been patiently waiting all along. A truth about value. A truth about recognition. A truth about why some connections continue shining quietly through the years, even when everything else changes. And in the next part, that truth finally begins to reveal itself, bringing this journey closer than ever to its deepest meaning.